was supposed to be just another morning commute. The 7:43 a.m. train had arrived exactly on time, groaning into the station with the same tired protest it gave every weekday. Commuters shuffled on board in a sleepy haze, coffee in hand, earbuds in place, eyes glued to phone screens. No one spoke. No one looked up. It was the language of the city: silence, proximity, and disengagement. Among them was a woman. She looked about 32, brown curls tucked neatly under a gray wool cap, a beige coat buttoned high at the collar, a simple canvas tote pressed to her chest as she held the pole for balance. Her name was Emma Brooks, and like many others, she was just trying to get through another long day. Except Emma wasn't like everyone else. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the anxiousness that lived quietly under her skin. Ever since her husband, Sheriff Cole Brooks, had left early for an emergency call and told her he'd meet her for lunch after his shift. She'd smiled and kissed him goodbye, pretending the knot in her stomach was nothing. Just nerves, just stress, just another train ride. The train rocked forward into the darkness of the tunnel. The light flickered above, stuttering once before holding steady. Emma swayed slightly with the motion, adjusting her grip on the tote. Inside it were a few small things from the early morning market: a jar of peach jam, 2 apples, and a small envelope she hadn't dared open yet. A letter from her mother's estate lawyer. She hadn't read it. Not yet. And then it happened. A voice. Loud, sharp, crude. "Hey, watch it, lady." A man, maybe in his 20s, wearing a hoodie and sneakers that still had the tags on them, shoved past Emma with his shoulder. She stumbled slightly, catching herself on the pole. The canvas tote slipped from her arms. One of the apples rolled out onto the floor, spiraling under the seats. The man glared at her like she'd insulted him. "You got eyes or what?" Emma's cheeks flushed pink. She bent quickly to retrieve the tote. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Another man nearby chuckled, one of those laughs that didn't mean anything kind. "Whole damn train's full," the thug muttered, plopping down on a half-empty bench and spreading his legs wide. "Guess you gotta fight for a seat now, even against Grandma." Emma didn't answer. She just stood near the door, clutching her bag, shrinking smaller by the second. No one said a word. Not the woman beside her. Not the teenager across the aisle. Not the businessman with the Bluetooth in his ear. They all saw. They all heard. But their silence spoke volumes. The train rumbled forward into darkness. But from the far end of the car, a figure shifted. A man, tall, broad, wearing a faded uniform jacket with a golden badge barely visible under the collar. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his eyes. His hands rested on the strap of a small duffel bag. He looked calm, too calm. That was Sheriff Cole Brooks. And while the rest of the passengers chose silence, he had already decided to stand. Emma Brooks wasn't someone you'd notice in a crowd. At 32, she moved through life with a quiet grace that rarely demanded attention, but never failed to leave an impression on those who truly saw her. She dressed simply, thoughtfully. Her makeup was minimal, her voice gentle. But behind her soft-spoken manners lived a woman who had faced storms without ever raising her voice. She'd grown up in a small farming town in the foothills of Virginia, a town where everyone knew your name, your story, and your business. Emma's mother had run the local diner for over 2 decades, while her father, long gone now, had been a war veteran who taught her to stand up straight and speak only when necessary. As a teenager, Emma played the piano in church and volunteered at the local nursing home. She never cared much for the spotlight. While her classmates chased big cities and bigger dreams, Emma stayed, helped raise her little brother after her father passed, took shifts at the diner, and when the town was hit by a flash flood and most people panicked, Emma was the one who organized the shelters and made sure no one was left behind. That's how Cole first noticed her. Back then, he was just Deputy Brooks, lean, serious, a little too quiet for his own good. He'd seen plenty of people break under pressure. But Emma? She never flinched, not even when her own home took water up to the windows. When he'd offered her a hand, she'd simply nodded and said, "Let's get to work." They'd married 2 years later, and now, almost a decade into their life together, Emma still surprised him, still refused to let the world harden her. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, but she chose her moments carefully. When her mother died, she didn't cry in public. She baked a peach pie for the entire church staff and thanked every person by name. When Cole was injured in a drug raid, she stayed beside him every night, reading out loud from her favorite novels, even when he was unconscious. To strangers, she was just a kind woman with soft eyes and quiet hands. But Cole knew better. Emma was steel wrapped in silk. And today, on that subway car, even as she stood clutching her tote bag with her head down and her pride bruised, there was a fire in her that refused to be put out. And he had seen enough. At the far end of the car, Sheriff Cole Brooks shifted his weight and took one slow step forward. The people in that subway car didn't know it yet, but the tide was about to turn. The subway car hissed as it entered the tunnel, and for a moment, the lights flickered, the kind of dim that made every silhouette feel heavier. Emma shifted her footing, steadying herself with the metal pole. Her tote bag pressed tightly against her chest, filled with nothing more than a carton of eggs, 2 apples, and a jar of blackberry jam she'd picked up from a little market that morning. She just wanted to get home. But the man beside her had other plans. He was in his late 20s, slouched across 2 seats with his legs splayed wide, a hoodie drawn over his head, a thick chain swinging around his neck. The music in his headphones blared faintly. His eyes flicked to Emma like she was an inconvenience he hadn't asked for. She gave him a small smile. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Would you mind letting me sit?" He didn't respond, didn't even blink, just leaned farther into the seat and jerked his thumb toward the standing crowd. Ain't no rules about sharing. First come, first served. Emma nodded slowly. She wasn't looking for a fight. She'd been raised to pick her battles wisely. She stood her ground, literally, tucking herself near the corner pole as the train rocked beneath them. But then he started laughing. Loud, unapologetic. "What you all looking at?" he called out to the other passengers. "Somebody tell Granny here she missed the memo. Ain't no special seats for the weak." A few passengers glanced up, then quickly away. A man in a suit adjusted his tie and looked down at his shoes. A teenage girl near the end of the car pulled her phone out but didn't press record. No one said a word. Emma remained silent, clutching her bag. But her cheeks were flushed now, her fingers curled tightly around the strap. Then came the shove. It wasn't brutal, but it was enough. The man jerked his shoulder back, deliberately slamming it into her ribs, causing her to stagger. Her tote bag slipped from her arm, tumbling to the floor. The jar of jam rolled out, then the apples. One of them hit his foot. He looked down, smirked, and stomped on it. A sickening crunch. The apple burst beneath his boot. Bits of pulp sprayed across the grimy floor. Emma knelt quickly to gather the rest, but he wasn't done. "Oops," he said, feigning innocence. "My foot slipped." Then he leaned down, slowly, deliberately. He picked up the cracked glass jar, held it in his hand like a toy, and let it drop. The jar hit the floor and shattered. The rich purple jam spread across the metal surface like blood from an open wound. The passengers watched. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. And then he laughed. A sharp, ugly sound that echoed down the car. "I mean, come on, what's in the bag anyway, Grandma? Food stamps and pity?" The insult hit harder than the shoulder, and this time Emma's eyes flickered, not with anger, but disbelief. She glanced around. Nothing. Still no one. Not a single voice dared speak on her behalf. And he saw that too. He leaned closer. "Thought so," he sneered. "You people, you think just 'cause you're old you get a pass. Not on my train." That was the moment. The line. And from the other end of the car, someone crossed it. Sheriff Cole Brooks raised his head. His boots shifted beneath him. One hand let go of the overhead rail, and his gaze locked, first on the man, then on his wife. He saw the broken jar, the bruised apple, and the quiet strength in the eyes of the woman he loved more than anything on this earth. Without a word, he began to walk. The thug was still laughing, still looking for approval from the crowd when he heard it. A boot hitting the floor. Measured, slow, echoing. Then another, and another. He turned, ready to bark out more mockery. But what he saw made the words die in his throat. A tall man, built solid as the mountains, in a worn sheriff's jacket and a Stetson hat that shadowed a jaw of stone, was walking straight toward him. The air in the car changed. People sat straighter. Phones lifted, not out of curiosity this time, but reverence. Even the subway itself seemed to quiet, as if bracing for something it knew was coming. The man in the hoodie cocked his head as Sheriff Cole approached. "What's this now?" he snorted, trying to reassert his bravado. We got ourselves a cowboy? Cole didn't answer. He just stopped, 3 feet away from the thug, the dim lights casting a long shadow behind him. He looked down, saw the broken glass and jam pooling near Emma's torn canvas bag. Then he looked at her, at the scratch on her arm, at her trembling hands, still clutching a bruised apple, like it was the last fragile piece of dignity she had left. His voice, when it came, was calm, low, controlled. "Pick it up." The thug blinked. "What?" "The apple," Cole said, not raising his tone. "Pick it up. Apologize to the lady." A hush rippled through the car. Conversations died. The hum of the wheels became the only sound, like the train itself was listening. The thug laughed nervously. "Nah, man, you got this all twisted. She was in my space. I ain't touch her. You elbowed her." Cole's tone didn't change, but now it carried weight, like the warning before a storm. "Back off, old man," the thug snapped, "before you get hurt." That was the moment the passengers held their breath. A woman near the back gripped her child tighter. A teenage boy raised his phone, hands suddenly steady. But Cole? He didn't move, didn't blink. He simply said, "I've walked into burning houses, disarmed men twice your size, pulled broken bodies from car wrecks at 2 a.m. You think I'm scared of you?" He stepped forward. The thug instinctively stepped back. "Apologize," Cole repeated, "and pick up the damn apple." The thug's chest puffed up. "I don't care if you're some backwater cop," he spat. "You ain't got a badge here." Cole slowly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Every muscle in the subway tensed. What he pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a badge. Tarnished. Worn. The star of the Wyoming County Sheriff's Office gleamed faintly under the flickering subway lights. "I'm on vacation," Cole said quietly, "but I don't stop being who I am." He paused. "And right now, I'm the only thing between you, and the kind of mistake you'll regret the rest of your life." The thug's bravado started to crack. His eyes darted to his surroundings, looking for support, but no one met his gaze. Even his earlier audience had vanished behind blank expressions and silent condemnation. "Yo, someone do something," he barked. No one moved. One of his own friends, the heavy-set guy with the Bluetooth earbuds, shook his head and stepped aside, making it clear he wanted no part of this anymore. That's when the thug realized he was alone. He bent down, grumbling curses under his breath, and picked up the apple. He held it awkwardly in both hands like he didn't know what to do next. Cole nodded toward Emma. The thug hesitated, then mumbled, "Sorry." It wasn't sincere, but it was enough. Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. She stood straighter, her chin lifted, and in that small motion, she reclaimed something they had tried to take from her. Cole stepped forward, took the apple from the thug's trembling hands and handed it back to his wife. Then he turned. "Sit down," he told the man, "and don't say another word." And the thug obeyed. He sat, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed to the floor. For the rest of the ride, he didn't lift his head. The subway car remained still. Passengers began to exhale. A few whispered thanks. One woman mouthed the word hero. Someone clapped once, then stopped, not wanting to shatter the sacred quiet that had fallen. Cole looked at Emma. She gave him a soft nod. "I'm okay," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, and the train rolled on. As the train thundered toward its next stop, no one dared speak above a whisper. The thug, who had bullied an old woman minutes earlier, now sat alone, hunched over, his shoulders curled like a man who had seen his reflection for the first time and hated it. He didn't make eye contact, not with the other passengers, not with Cole, not with himself in the faint window reflection. The swagger was gone, so was the grin. What remained was the heavy weight of being seen for what he truly was, and what he had almost done. Across the car, passengers began to breathe easier, but not one of them forgot what they had witnessed, because they hadn't just seen a confrontation. They had seen a lesson. A woman near the back wiped tears from her cheeks. She hadn't been touched, hadn't even been near the front of the car, but something about the way Cole had stood up, silent and unwavering, made her feel seen, safe. A teenage boy who had frozen earlier now looked down at the phone in his hand and slowly hit delete. This wasn't something to post for likes. This was something to remember. In the far corner, the man in the suit who had looked away earlier was now watching Cole with quiet admiration. The kind of look a man gives when he realizes he should have done something, but is grateful someone else did. The moment didn't belong to Cole alone. It belonged to the people who had stayed silent and now realized silence has a cost. It belonged to those who looked away and now understood that looking away is a choice, just like standing up is. And in the center of it all, Emma sat quietly beside her husband, her hand wrapped gently around his. The tremor in her fingers had faded. Her eyes were tired, but there was strength there now. Not because she had been saved, but because she had been respected. She had been defended. She had been believed. There was no fanfare, no music, no dramatic speech. Just a man who saw wrong and made it right, with nothing more than presence and principle. The thug didn't speak again. No one clapped. No one needed to, because sometimes the most powerful statement is made in silence. And the lesson? It lingered. Long after the train reached its next stop, long after Cole and Emma stepped off, arm in arm, long after the doors closed behind them and the subway resumed its endless rhythm beneath the city. The train rolled on through the underground, but something in that car had shifted forever. People who had once stared at their feet now looked around, not in fear, but in awareness, because they had seen something rare, not violence, not vengeance, but honor. It didn't wear a badge on its chest that day. It wore a leather jacket, bore a scar near the temple, and walked with the calm resolve of a man who had long ago decided what kind of person he would be, everywhere, not just in uniform. When Emma and Cole reached the street level, sunlight filtered through the gray morning clouds. She leaned against him just slightly, not because she was weak, but because she could. Cole glanced sideways at her. "You good?" he asked, soft as ever. She smiled faintly. "I am now." He nodded. That was all he needed to hear. Behind them, the city came back to life. Cars passed, horns honked, crosswalks blinked red and white. But the people who had been on that train, they'd carry something different into their day. Some would remember the courage, others the silence that followed. But all of them would remember the sheriff who didn't flinch, not because he was brave, but because he knew what mattered. It wasn't the uniform. It wasn't the law. It was dignity, respect, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, but gives it without needing to be earned. And Emma? She wasn't just the woman who got pushed. She was the woman who stood her ground. And the man beside her, the man who had loved her long before the world tried to judge her by the way she looked or where she stood, was the reminder that love, when it's real, defends without asking permission. So if you ever find yourself in a moment where wrong is happening and everyone's waiting for someone else to do something, maybe you'll remember them. Emma, Cole, the silent stand in a subway car. Because heroes don't always arrive with capes and soundtracks. Sometimes they wear cowboy boots and carry groceries. And sometimes they simply stand up. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by everyday acts of courage and dignity. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or real events is purely coincidental. Our intention is to shed light on the power of respect, quiet strength, and standing up for what's right, without glorifying violence or confrontation. We believe everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and decency, regardless of age, appearance, or status. If this story moved you, we invite you to reflect, share, and continue spreading empathy in a world that needs it more than ever.